I stood on the porch, the red and blue lights of the police cruiser washing over my grandmother's prize-winning rose bushes. It was a humid Tuesday evening, the kind where the air feels heavy and still, like it's holding its breath before a storm. But the storm had already arrived, and it was standing right next to me, wearing a floral blouse and a look of smug satisfaction. My mother-in-law, Patricia, had her arms crossed over her chest. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the two officers walking up the driveway, her chin tilted up in that way that usually meant she believed she had already won the argument. One of the officers, a younger man with a kind but tired face, adjusted his belt and looked between the two of us. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Patricia, "you're saying this woman is trespassing." "I'm not saying she is trespassing, officer," Patricia said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she reserved for church Sundays and public spectacles. "I'm saying I want her removed from my son's property immediately. She's become hostile, and I don't feel safe in my own home." My own home. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was hysterical. It was the sound of a woman who had bent over backwards until her spine snapped. I looked at the house behind me, the Victorian siding, the wraparound porch, the stained glass window in the foyer that my great-grandfather had installed with his own hands in 1924. "Patricia," I whispered, my voice shaking not with fear, but with a rage so cold it frightened me. "Do not do this." She finally looked at me then. Her eyes were hard like marbles. "It's done, Elena. Mark isn't here to protect you anymore. You've overstayed your welcome." To understand how I ended up facing eviction from the very house I was born in by a woman who had arrived with 2 suitcases and a victim complex, we have to go back. We have to go back 3 months to a conversation that seemed innocent at the time, a conversation that ruined my peace. My life with Mark was, for the most part, quiet. We had been married for 4 years. Mark was a structural engineer, soft-spoken, brilliant with numbers, but notoriously conflict avoidant. He was the kind of man who would eat a cold meal at a restaurant rather than send it back because he didn't want to make a fuss. I loved that gentleness about him. I thought it was peace. I didn't realize then that passivity can be just as dangerous as aggression if it's pointed in the wrong direction. We lived in my family home. When my grandmother passed, she left the house directly to me, not to my parents who had their own lives in Florida, and not to us, to me, Elena. It was a beautiful, sprawling old thing on the edge of town, paid off and full of memories. When Mark moved in, he joked that he was marrying up because of the real estate. We never really talked about the deed or the legalities. We didn't have to. We were husband and wife. What was mine was his, in spirit anyway. The trouble started over a pot of coffee on a rainy Sunday morning. Mark had been pacing the kitchen, running his hair through his hair, which meant he had news he was afraid to tell me. "So," he started, staring into his mug, "the firm got the contract, the bridge project in Singapore." "Mark, that's amazing," I said, putting down my toast. "That's a huge promotion." "It is," he said, but he didn't smile. "But there's a catch, Elle. They need me on site for 6 months, maybe longer." My heart sank a little. 6 months was a long time. But we were solid. We could handle long distance. "We'll make it work," I assured him. "Video calls every night, visits when we can." He nodded, looking relieved, but then he took a breath. "Elle, there's one more thing. My mom." I stiffened. Patricia was difficult. She wasn't openly cruel, at least not usually. She was an expert in the backhanded compliment, the heavy sigh, the subtle dig. Since her husband, Mark's dad, had passed 2 years prior, she had made loneliness her full-time job. "What about her?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "She's been having a hard time lately," Mark said, finally looking at me with those puppy dog eyes. "Her apartment complex is doing renovations. The noise is driving her crazy. She called me yesterday crying, saying she can't hear herself think." I knew where this was going. I could feel the walls closing in. "She can't stay here, Mark," I said softly. "6 months? Without you here as a buffer? It wouldn't work." "It wouldn't be for the whole 6 months," he lied, or maybe he believed it. "Just until the renovations are done. Maybe a few weeks, a month tops. And think about it, Elle. You'll be all alone in this big old house. It creaks, it gets lonely. Having her here might actually be nice for both of you." I looked at my husband. I saw how stressed he was about the new job. I saw how much he wanted to solve his mother's problems so he could leave the country with a clear conscience. I loved him, and because I loved him, I made the biggest mistake of my life. "Okay," I sighed, "if it's just for a month and she stays in the guest suite downstairs." Mark kissed me, looking like a weight had been lifted. "You're the best, Elle, seriously. She'll be helpful. She loves to cook. It'll be great." 2 weeks later, Mark was at the airport hugging me goodbye, and 4 hours after that, Patricia pulled into the driveway. She didn't come in a taxi, she came in a moving van. I stood on the porch watching the driver unload box after box. It wasn't just a suitcase of clothes. It was lamps. It was boxes labeled kitchen and linens and fragile china. "Patricia," I said, walking down the steps as she directed the movers with a clipboard in hand, "Mark said you were staying for a few weeks. This looks like a lot." She turned to me, adjusting her oversized sunglasses. "Oh, Elena, hello, dear. You look tired. Are you sleeping well?" "I'm fine," I said, trying to ignore the jab. "I'm asking about the boxes." "Well, you can't expect me to live out of a suitcase at my age," she dismissively said. "Besides, Mark said I should make myself comfortable. That boy worries so much about me. I promised him I'd take care of things while he was gone." She swept past me, marching up the steps of my house like a general claiming a conquered fortress. "Careful with that lamp," she barked at a mover. "That goes in the master bedroom." I froze. "Excuse me?" I called out. "The guest suite is downstairs, Patricia. The master bedroom is upstairs. That's my room." She stopped at the door, turning slowly. A small, pitying smile played on her lips. "Oh, honey, you don't need all that space just for yourself, do you? It seems silly to heat the whole upstairs just for one person. I thought I'd take the big room, you can take the guest suite, and we can save on utilities. Mark is always saying we need to be more frugal." "No," I said firmly. It was the first boundary I set. "I am sleeping in my bedroom. You are sleeping in the guest suite. That is not up for discussion." She stared at me for a long moment, testing me. Then she shrugged, as if conceding a point to a toddler. "Fine, if you want to be difficult about it. Downstairs it is. But these boxes are coming inside. I can't abide that dreadful wallpaper in the hallway. It makes the place look like a mausoleum." "It's Victorian floral," I said, my teeth clenched. "My grandmother chose it." "Exactly," she said, stepping inside. "Dead people shouldn't decorate for the living." The door clicked shut. I stood alone on the porch, the summer breeze suddenly feeling very cold. I had a pit in my stomach, a deep primal instinct warning me that I had just let a fox into the henhouse. But I told myself I was overreacting. It was just a month. I could handle a month. I didn't know then that a month was never the plan. The first week wasn't a battle. It was a slow, suffocating erosion. You know how the tide comes in? It doesn't rush all at once. It just creeps up, inch by inch, until suddenly you look down and realize the ground you were standing on is gone. That was life with Patricia. I worked as a graphic designer, mostly from a small home office I'd set up in the sunroom at the back of the house. It was my sanctuary, full of light, my grandmother's ferns, and my drafting table. But by day 3, my sanctuary had been breached. I'd be on a Zoom call with a client trying to discuss branding layouts, and I'd hear it, the aggressive vacuuming right outside my glass doors. Whir, thump, whir. When I stepped out on my lunch break, the house smelled different. It didn't smell like my lavender candles or the old oak wood anymore. It smelled of industrial bleach and heavy, cloying potpourri that Patricia had scattered in bowls on every surface. "Patricia?" I called out on that Wednesday, walking into the kitchen. I stopped dead. My kitchen, my bright, chaotic, lived-in kitchen, was sterile. My spice rack, which I organized by cuisine, was gone. The counters were completely bare. Patricia was standing by the sink, scrubbing a pan with a steel wool pad that was definitely ruining the nonstick coating. She hummed a little tune, not looking up. "Where is everything?" I asked, feeling that tightness in my chest again. She turned, wiping her hands on a towel. "Oh, Elena, I just tidied up. It was so cluttered in here. How do you find anything? I put the spices in the pantry, alphabetized, and I moved those mismatched mugs to the garage. We should really get a matching set. Presentation is everything." "Those mugs were gifts," I said, my voice rising, "from my friends, from Mark." "They were chipped," she said simply. "I'm making a pot roast for dinner, Mark's favorite. I thought we could FaceTime him while we eat, show him how well we're getting along." That was her weapon of choice, Mark. Every time I tried to set a boundary, she used his name like a shield. If I complained, I was stressing Mark out. If I tried to reclaim my space, I was being territorial while he was working so hard for us. The FaceTime calls were the worst part. We would sit at the dining table, a table she had insisted on covering with a lace tablecloth I hated, and she would prop the iPad up against the centerpiece. "Hi, sweetie," she'd coo, practically pushing her face into the camera, blocking me out. "Oh, you look tired. Are you eating? I made your pot roast tonight. Alina is just picking at it, but it's delicious." "Hey, Mom. Hey, Elle. How's everything? House still standing?" "Everything is wonderful," Patricia would answer before I could open my mouth. "We're having such a good time. I've been helping Elena get organized. The house was falling into a bit of disarray, Mark, but don't worry, I'm handling it." I would see Mark's shoulders relax. "That's great, Mom. Thanks. Elle, you okay?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "No, she threw away my mugs, and she vacuums during my meetings, and she treats me like a guest in my own house." But I looked at his tired face thousands of miles away, and I swallowed the truth. "I'm fine," I'd say, forcing a smile. "Just busy with work." "See?" Patricia would pat my hand, her skin dry and papery. "She works so much. It's a good thing I'm here to manage the home." Manage the home, the phrase stuck in my throat like a fishbone. The shift from annoying guest to hostile occupier happened in the 3rd week. It started with the mail. I usually brought the mail in. It was a habit. I'd grab the bundle from the box at the end of the driveway when I finished work. But lately, the mailbox had been empty every time I checked it. "Did the mail run today?" I asked Patricia one evening. She was watching a game show in the living room, her feet propped up on my coffee table, shoes still on. "Oh, yes," she said, not looking away from the TV. "I brought it in. It's on the counter, mostly junk." I went to the counter. There was a small pile, mostly flyers and a bill for me, but something felt off. It was too thin. I started sifting through the recycling bin under the sink. Patricia had become obsessed with recycling immediately. Buried under some vegetable peelings and coffee grounds, I saw an envelope. It wasn't junk mail. It was a heavy, official-looking envelope from the city. I fished it out, wiping a potato peel off the corner. It was addressed to Resident. I opened it. It was a notification about a zoning hearing for our neighborhood. Boring stuff. But then I saw another envelope beneath it. This one was addressed specifically to Patricia Miller. I frowned. Why was she getting mail here? Not to care of Elena, but just her name at my address. I flipped it over. It was a confirmation from the post office. Official change of address confirmation. Old address, 402 Maple, Apt 4B. New address, 1200 Oak Haven Lane. My address. My hands started to shake. You don't fill out a permanent change of address for a 1-month visit. You forward your mail temporarily. A permanent change meant she had told the government, the banks, and the world that she lived here. Not that she was staying here, that she lived here. I walked into the living room, the paper crunched in my fist. "Patricia," I said. My voice was calm, but it was the calm before a hurricane. Why did you change your address to this house?" She finally looked away from the TV. She saw the paper in my hand, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something sharp in her eyes. Panic? No, calculation. "Oh, that," she waved a hand dismissively. "It was just easier, Elena. With the renovations at the apartment, I didn't want my bank statements getting lost or stolen by workmen. It's just administrative. Don't be so dramatic." "It's not administrative," I said, stepping closer. "This is a permanent change. It establishes residency. You told me you were staying for a month." "Plans change," she said, her voice dropping an octave. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. She wasn't the frail old lady anymore. She was looming. "My dear," she said, walking past me toward the kitchen, "it's Mark's house. He pays the bills, doesn't he? He's the man of the house, and as his mother, I think I have a little more right to be here than you think you do." She stopped at the doorway and looked back over her shoulder. "By the way, the contractors are coming tomorrow at 8 a.m. Make sure you're dressed." I froze. "Contractors? For what?" "To measure the guest suite," she said, smiling. "It's too cramped. I'm having the wall knocked down to expand into the den. Mark said it was fine." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every rustle of the wind sounded like a whisper. I felt like a stranger in the room I had grown up in. At 7:45 a.m., a white van pulled into the driveway. Miller Construction. No relation to us, just a cruel coincidence. I was already dressed. I was wearing my client meeting blazer, not because I had a meeting, but because I needed armor. I walked out the front door before they could even ring the bell. A large man with a clipboard stepped out. "Morning. We're here for the remodel. Mrs. Miller let us in the gate." "I'm Mrs. Miller," I said, my voice steady, "and I didn't hire you." He looked confused, checking his paper. "Order came from a Patricia Miller, said she's the owner." "Patricia is my mother-in-law," I said, stepping between him and the door. "She is a guest. She does not own this property. I do. And if you touch one brick on this house without my signature, I will sue your company into bankruptcy. Do I make myself clear?" The man blinked. He looked at the house, then back at me. He saw the fire in my eyes. "Look, lady, I don't want no trouble. I'll call the office." "You do that," I said, "and then you leave." As the van backed out of the driveway, the front door opened. Patricia stood there in her silk robe, a mug of coffee in hand. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed. "That was very rude, Elena," she said, sipping her coffee. "I had already paid the deposit." "With whose money?" I snapped, turning on her. "You're retired, Patricia. Did you use Mark's card?" She smiled, a tight, thin thing. "Mark wants his mother to be comfortable. I don't see why you're so jealous of that." "I am calling him," I said, brushing past her, "right now." I marched to my office, slammed the door, and locked it. I dialed Mark on FaceTime. It was late night in Singapore, but I didn't care. He answered on the third ring, looking groggy. "Elle, is everything okay? It's like 2 a.m. here." "Did you tell your mother she could knock down the wall between the guest room and the den?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. Mark rubbed his face. What? No. I mean, she mentioned the room felt small. She asked if she could make some adjustments. I thought she meant like moving the furniture or maybe painting. She hired a construction crew, Mark. She tried to tear down a load-bearing wall. Oh, Mark said. He looked pained. Okay, that's a lot. Look, she's just dramatic. You know how she is. She probably just got carried away. Don't be too hard on her, Elle. She's lonely. Don't be hard on her? I felt like I was screaming underwater. Mark, she changed her address to this house. She's throwing away my things. She's treating me like an intruder. You need to tell her to leave now. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence. I can't do that, Elena, he said quietly. Why not? Because she's my mom, and look, I didn't want to tell you this, but she sold her apartment. The air left the room. She did what? She sold her condo before she came there. She has nowhere else to go, Elle. That money is her retirement. She can't afford a new place right now, and she's expecting to stay with us indefinitely. And when were you going to tell me this? I whispered. I didn't know how, he admitted, looking down. I knew you'd be upset. I thought if you guys just spent some time together, you'd bond and it would happen naturally. Please, Elle, do it for me. Just until I get back. We'll figure it out then. He looked so pathetic, so weak, and in that moment, the love I had for him didn't disappear, but it cracked. It fractured like a windshield hit by a rock. You lied to me, I said. You moved her in here permanently without asking me. It's our house, Elena, he said, his voice gaining a little defensive edge. I should have a say in who lives there. It's my house, Mark. My name is on the deed. My grandmother left it to me. Yeah, legally, he waved his hand, dismissing the law like it was a minor annoyance. But we're married. It's the same thing. Look, I have to go to sleep. I have a site inspection in 4 hours. Just play nice, please. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time. I realized then that I was fighting a war on 2 fronts. One enemy was in the kitchen, drinking my coffee. The other was in Singapore, gaslighting me into submission. I decided to stop fighting. At least that's what I wanted them to think. For the next 3 days, I went silent. I didn't argue when Patricia rearranged the living room furniture. I didn't complain when she invited her bridge club friends over and they looked at me like I was the hired help. I just watched, and I waited. The explosion happened on Friday. I had gone out to meet a client, my first time leaving the house for more than an hour in weeks. When I returned, my key didn't work. I jiggled it. I pulled it out and tried again. Nothing. The lock was stiff. It was new. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I pounded on the door. "Patricia!" I yelled. "Open the door!" I heard footsteps. The curtain in the side window moved. Then the door opened a crack. The chain was on. Patricia peered out, looking nervous but determined. Behind her, I could see 2 suitcases, my suitcases, sitting in the hallway. "Patricia, what is going on?" I demanded. "Why are my keys not working?" "You need to leave, Elena," she said, her voice trembling, but she held her ground. "I've spoken to a lawyer." You spoke to a lawyer?" "Yes," she said, gaining confidence. "This is my son's house. I am his mother. I have residency here now. I have mail to prove it. And Mark tells me you've been abusive, causing him stress, interfering with his work." "I have been abusive?" I laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. "I'm filing for a restraining order," she said. "My lawyer says because I'm an elderly resident and you are creating a hostile environment, I have the right to remain in the home for my safety. And since Mark is the owner and he wants me here—" She tried to shut the door. I jammed my foot in the gap. "Mark isn't the owner, Patricia," I hissed. "Don't lie," she spat. "He's the man. He pays the bills. It's marital property. My lawyer explained it all. If you divorce, he gets half anyway, and since he's not here, I'm acting as his proxy. You can pick up your things on the porch later. I've packed a bag for you." She kicked my foot away and slammed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I stood there on the porch of the house I was born in. My suitcases were not on the porch. She hadn't even put them out yet. She had locked me out with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. I could have screamed. I could have broken a window. I could have called Mark and begged him to fix this. But I didn't. A strange calm washed over me. It was the calm of someone who knows they are holding a royal hush while their opponent is betting the farm on a pair of twos. She thought Mark owned the house. She thought marital property applied to an inheritance kept separate. She thought she had established residency. She had made one critical error. She assumed I was stupid. I walked down the steps, got in my car, and drove. I didn't go to a hotel. I went to the county clerk's office, and then I went to the police station. The police station smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. I sat on a hard plastic bench, clutching a manila folder I had retrieved from my safety deposit box at the bank on the way over. "Elena?" I looked up. It was Officer Miller, the one from the intro. He wasn't related to Mark either, thank God. He was an old high school friend of my cousin. "Tom," I said, standing up, "I need help. I've been illegally locked out of my home." Tom frowned, taking out his notepad. "Locked out? You mean you lost your keys?" "No," I said. "I mean my mother-in-law changed the locks while I was at work and told me I'm evicted." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Your mother-in-law? Is it her house?" "No," I said, opening the folder. I pulled out the deed, the original deed, with the gold seal of the county. "It's mine, sole ownership, inherited prior to marriage, never commingled. My husband's name is nowhere on this title." Tom looked at the document. He whistled low. "Okay, that's pretty clear. And she's in there now?" "She's in there, and she claims she has residency because she changed her mailing address." Tom sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay, that gets a little tricky. If she's established residency, we usually can't just kick her out. It's a civil matter. You have to go through eviction courts." "She's been there 3 weeks," I said. "The legal limit for tenancy in this state is 30 days. She's on day 24. I had checked the statutes in the parking lot. I knew my rights. "She's a guest who has overstayed," I continued, my voice firm. "She is trespassing, and she has illegally barred the homeowner from entry. That is a criminal offense, Tom. Unlawful detainer. I want to go home, and I want you to escort me." Tom looked at me, then at the deed, then at the clock. "All right, Elena, let's take a ride." We pulled up to the house just as the sun was starting to set. The house looked warm and inviting from the outside, the porch light glowing. It made me sick to think of her inside, probably drinking my wine, thinking she had won. When Patricia saw the police car, she didn't hide. She walked right out onto the porch, just like in the beginning of the story. She thought the police were her personal security force. She gave her speech about feeling unsafe. She played the frail old lady card. "Ma'am," Tom said, cutting off her monologue about my hostility, "you're saying this is your son's house." "Yes," Patricia said, clutching her pearls. "And as his mother—" "Ma'am," Tom interrupted again. He held up the deed. "I have a title document here listing Elena Vance as the sole owner of this property. Your son isn't on it." Patricia blinked. She squinted at the paper. That's a forgery. Mark told me it was his. He pays the mortgage." "There is no mortgage, Patricia," I said, speaking for the first time. "The house is paid off. My grandmother paid it off in 1990. The color drained from her face. It was instantaneous. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated fear. She looked at the officer, then at me, then back at the officer. But I live here. I changed my address. I have rights. You can't just throw an old woman on the street." "You've been here 24 days," I said. "You are a guest, and I am revoking your invitation. You have exactly 1 hour to pack your things and leave." "I have nowhere to go," she shrieked. The facade of the sweet old lady cracked completely. Her face twisted into an ugly snarl. "You selfish, ungrateful little witch. I sold my apartment. I gave Mark the money for his investments. I gave him the check. $200,000. He said he would invest it for us. He said I could live here with you until the returns came in and we bought a bigger place together. He promised." The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just about the house. It wasn't just about a toxic mother-in-law. Mark hadn't just been weak. He had been stealing. He had taken his mother's life savings, told her the house was his to keep her quiet, and fled the country to Singapore. He had set us up. He had put 2 women in a cage match to distract us while he ran off with the money. I looked at Patricia, really looked at her. I didn't see a monster anymore. I saw a pawn. A nasty, cruel pawn, but a pawn nonetheless. "Tom," I said quietly, "give us a minute." "Elena, I can remove her right now." "Just a minute." I walked up the steps until I was standing face to face with Patricia. She was trembling. She looked small. "Did you really give him the money?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered, tears leaking out of her eyes. 2 weeks ago, he said he needed it to secure the Singapore contract. He said it would double in 6 months. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Mark. I opened my banking app. I checked the joint account Mark and I shared, the one where we put money for bills. It was empty. I checked my personal savings. That was still there, thank God. But the joint account, which had about $15,000 in it for emergency repairs, gone. Withdrawal date, 2 days before he left. I looked at Patricia. For the first time in weeks, we weren't enemies. We were victims. "Patricia," I said, my voice hard, "steel. Go inside." "You're kicking me out?" "No," I said. "Go inside, sit down, and shut up. We're not calling Mark. We're calling the FBI." The next 3 hours were a blur of paperwork and realization. Officer Tom didn't leave. In fact, he called a detective. When you mention wire fraud and theft of $200,000, the police tend to get a lot more interested than they are in a landlord-tenant dispute. Patricia sat at my kitchen table, the one she had decluttered, her hands shaking around a mug of tea I had made her. She told the detective everything, the coercion, the promises, the way Mark had convinced her that I was unstable and bad with money, which is why he needed her funds directly. "He told me you were planning to divorce him," Patricia sniffled, blowing her nose on a tissue. "He said you were trying to take the house from him. That's why I was so awful to you. I thought I was protecting my son's property." I sat across from her. I wanted to be angry at her. I was angry at her. She had been cruel, invasive, and nasty, but she had been weaponized. Mark had played us like a fiddle. He knew his mother was territorial and insecure. He knew I was passive and accommodating. He threw us together, lit a match, and ran away with the cash while the house burned down. "We need to get him on the phone," the detective, a gruff man named Detective Holloway, said. "We need him to admit he took the funds." "He won't answer if I call," I said. "He thinks I'm the enemy." "He'll answer me," Patricia said. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were full of a dark, vengeful fire. "He thinks he won." She pulled out her phone. She put it on speaker. She dialed Mark. It rang and rang, then a click. "Hey, Mom." Mark's voice filled the kitchen. He sounded cheerful, carefree. "How's it going? Did you get the wall down?" Patricia looked at me. I nodded. Mark, she said, her voice trembling. This time it was an act, a brilliant performance. Mark, she's kicking me out. The police are here. They say the deed is in her name. Mark, you told me it was yours. Whoa, calm down, Mark said. His tone shifted instantly to that smooth managerial voice. Put the officer on. I'll explain. It's a misunderstanding. They won't talk to you, Patricia sobbed. They're throwing my suitcases on the lawn. Mark, I have nowhere to go. What about the money? Can you send me some of the money back so I can get a hotel? Just until this blows over. There was a pause, a long, calculating pause. Mom, I can't touch the money right now. It's locked in a fixed-term bond. You know that. Look, just go to a motel. Use your credit card. I'll pay you back next month. I don't have a credit card, Mark, she screamed. I paid off your debts with my credit line. You said you'd handle it. Okay, stop screaming, Mark snapped. The mask was slipping. Jesus, Mom, can't you handle one thing? I'm trying to work here. Just leave the house. Go to Aunt Sarah's. I'll fix it when I get back. When are you coming back? Silence. Absolute silence on the line. Elena? Mark's voice was ice cold. Hi, honey, I said. You're on speaker, and Detective Holloway is listening too. Mark Miller, this is the state police. We have reason to believe you have committed felony wire fraud and grand larceny. I suggest you return to the United States immediately. We heard a sharp intake of breath. Then the line went dead. The silence after the line went dead was heavier than the screaming had been. Detective Holloway took the phone from Patricia's trembling hand. He didn't look triumphant. He looked grim. He explained the reality to us, and it was a bucket of ice water on any hope of a quick fix. Here's the situation, he said, closing his notebook. We have a confession of sorts, recorded on body cam. We have the paper trail of the wire transfer. But he's in Singapore. Extradition for financial crimes isn't like a murder charge. It's slow, it's bureaucratic, and if he moves the money to an offshore account that doesn't cooperate with U.S. subpoena laws, that cash is gone. So what do we do? I asked, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. We freeze what we can, Holloway said. I'll start the paperwork for a warrant, but until he steps back on U.S. soil or until we can get the Singaporean authorities to play ball, he's a ghost. My advice? Lock down your credit, change your passwords, and wait. Wait. The police left around 10 p.m. The house, which had been a war zone for weeks, was suddenly just a house again, a big, empty, quiet house. I stood in the hallway. Patricia was still sitting at the kitchen table. She looked like a deflated balloon. All the sharp edges, the arrogance, the mother of the owner posturing, it had all evaporated, leaving a scared, broke old woman in its wake. I looked at my suitcases, still sitting by the door where she had threatened to throw them out. Elena, she whispered. She didn't look at me. She was staring into her empty mug. I can go to a shelter or sleep in my car. I understand if you want me gone. I looked at her. I hated her. I truly did. She had made my life hell. She had insulted my family, my taste, my ownership of my own home. But I looked at the clock. It was late. I looked at her hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. If I kicked her out now, knowing she had $0 to her name because my husband had stolen it, I would be no better than Mark. You're not sleeping in your car, I said, my voice flat. You're staying here. She looked up, eyes wide. Really? Don't get used to it, I snapped, the anger flaring up. You're staying because we're the only two people in the world who know what Mark is doing, and if we're going to get that money back, we need to work together. But we are going to have ground rules. I walked into the kitchen and slammed my hand on the table. She flinched. Rule 1, I said. This is my house. You are a guest. You do not move furniture. You do not touch my mail. You do not speak to contractors. Yes, She nodded rapidly. Yes, of course. Rule 2, I continued. You tell me everything. Every email he sent you, every text, every bank account number you gave him. We are going to dig through every scrap of paper in this house until we find where he's hiding that money. Patricia nodded again, tears spilling over. I'm so sorry, Alina. I was just so scared of being alone. He promised me. I don't want your apology, I said, turning away because I couldn't bear to see her cry. It was too confusing. I want my husband in handcuffs. Go to the guest room. We start in the morning. That night was the longest of my life. I didn't sleep in my bed. I slept on the couch in my office, clutching my laptop like a shield. I logged into every account I could think of. That's when I found the second betrayal. It wasn't just the savings. I logged into the mortgage portal, not for the house because there wasn't one, but for a rental property Mark had bought 3 years ago in the city. He always said the rent covered the mortgage and it paid for itself. I saw the status: foreclosure proceedings initiated. He hadn't paid the mortgage in 6 months. He had been pocketing the tenant's rent money and letting the bank take the property. I felt sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. This wasn't a sudden desperation. This wasn't a bad investment. This was a systemic dismantling of our financial life. He had been planning an exit strategy for a long time. The next morning, the sun rose, indifferent to my ruin. I walked into the kitchen. The smell of coffee hit me. Patricia was there. She was dressed, not in her silk robes, but in simple planks and a blouse. She wasn't sitting at the head of the table. She was standing. I made coffee, she said timidly, and I found these. She pointed to the counter. There, lined up perfectly, were my mismatched mugs, the ones she said she had thrown away. I didn't break them, she admitted, looking at her shoes. I hid them in a box in the garage. I was just being spiteful. I'm sorry. I stared at the mugs. It was such a small thing, a pathetic olive branch. But I took one. I poured the coffee. The rental property is in foreclosure, I said, taking a sip. Patricia's face paled. The one on 5th Street? Yes. He stopped paying the mortgage in January. Patricia gripped the counter. Elena, in January, he asked me for a bridge loan of $10,000 to fix the roof on that building. He said the insurance was delaying the check. I looked at her. Did you give it to him? Yes, she whispered, from my IRA. We stared at each other. The magnitude of the deception was growing by the hour. We need to go through his office, I said, the physical office, here in the house, the one he keeps locked. Mark had a man cave in the basement. He always kept it locked, saying it was dangerous because of his engineering equipment, 3D printers, soldering irons, expensive tools. I never questioned it. I respected his privacy. We went to the basement door. It was locked, obviously. Do you have a key? Patricia asked. No, I said. I looked around. I grabbed a hammer from the utility drawer. I don't just break the lock. I smashed the knob until the wood splintered. It felt good. It felt like hitting Mark. We pushed the door open. The air inside was stale and cold. I flicked on the light. It wasn't a workshop. There were no 3D printers, no soldering irons. It was a storage unit. Walls of filing cabinets, boxes stacked to the ceiling, and in the corner, a single desk with a high-powered shredder and a laptop docking station. My God, Patricia breathed. He wasn't engineering down here. What was he doing? I walked to the nearest filing cabinet. It wasn't labeled with project names. The labels were names of people: Sarah Jenkins, Robert Thorne, Davina McCall. I pulled out a file. Robert Thorne. Inside were credit reports, bank statements, and copies of a life insurance policy. Who are these people? Patricia asked, peering over my shoulder. I don't know, I said, flipping through the pages. Then I saw a photo stapled to a document. It was a photo of Mark, but he had a beard, and the name on the ID wasn't Mark Miller, it was Marcus Thorne. He's not just stealing from us, I whispered, the room spinning. Patricia, I think he's done this before. This wasn't just a bad husband. We had stumbled onto a career criminal, and we were the only ones who had figured it out. We have to go through all of this, I said, looking at the wall of boxes. Every single page. If he run a long con, he made a mistake somewhere. Grifters always get arrogant. They always leave a crumb. Patricia nodded. She rolled up her sleeves. For the first time, she looked like the formidable woman I had feared, but this time she was on my side. I'll start on the bottom shelf, she said. I used to be a bookkeeper, you know, before I retired. If he cooked the books, I'll find the burned edges. We spent the next 4 days in that basement. We didn't shower. We barely ate. We existed on coffee and rage. We built a timeline on the wall using sticky notes. 2018, Mark marries me, moves into my paid-off house. 2019, Mark buys the rental property, using a loan in a fake name we discovered. 2020, Mark convinces Patricia to sell her condo, the first attempt. 2021, Mark takes out a life insurance policy on me. I froze when I found that one. It was dated 3 years ago, a policy for $2 million. Beneficiary, Mark Miller. Cause of death inclusions, accidental, medical complications. I sat back on the cold concrete floor, holding the paper. Patricia, I said, my voice trembling, look at this. She took the paper. She read it. Her hand flew to her mouth. He asked me, she started, her eyes wide with horror. Before he left for Singapore, he asked if you had updated your will. He asked if you had any underlying health conditions. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the basement temperature. He wasn't just planning to steal the money, I realized. He was waiting for me to die. Or maybe he was hoping I would. Suddenly, the stress he claimed I was causing him, the way he tried to isolate me from my friends, the way he encouraged Patricia to come in and drive me crazy, it all clicked. He wanted me to snap. The phone screen glowed in the darkness of the kitchen like a toxic isotope. Patricia's thumb hovered over the send button. "Are you sure about the wording?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Read it one more time," I said. I was leaning against the counter, my arms crossed so tight my ribs hurt. Mark. Emergency. Elena collapsed in the garden. Paramedics say it's heart failure. They have her in the ICU at St. Jude's. Doctors are asking for the medical proxy. I don't know what to do. Please answer. It was perfect. It touched on every single one of his triggers. Urgency, his control over my medical decisions as my husband, and the looming possibility of a payout. Heart failure was the key phrase. It matched the accidental medical clause in the insurance policy we found. "Send it," I said. Patricia pressed the button. Sent. Then the waiting began. It was a torture I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. We sat in that kitchen for 40 minutes. The refrigerator hummed. A faucet dripped. I watched the second hand on the clock tick by, each second feeling like an hour. Ding! We both jumped. Patricia grabbed the phone. "It's him!" I leaned in. The message was short, cold. "Mark, is she conscious?" Not, "Is she okay?" Not, "Oh my God!" Just, "Is she conscious?" "He wants to know if I can talk," I whispered, a fresh wave of nausea hitting me. "If I'm conscious, I can change the will, or I can tell the police." "Tell him no," I instructed. "Tell him I'm intubated." Patricia typed. "No, she's on a ventilator. It looks bad, Mark. The doctor said her heart was too weak from the stress. They need you here to sign for the next steps. We held our breath. The next steps implied pulling the plug. It was a dark, gruesome thing to imply about yourself, but I had to play dead to catch a vulture. 3 minutes later, the phone rang. "Don't answer," I hissed. "If he hears the background noise of the house, he'll know you aren't at the hospital." Patricia let it ring to voicemail. Then she texted back. "Can't talk. In the quiet zone. Nurses are watching. When are you coming? I can't handle the paperwork alone." The response came almost instantly. "Mark, booking a flight now. Don't sign anything. Don't let them operate. I need to approve everything. I'll be there in 20 hours. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since Tuesday. "He's coming." "He's coming for the money," Patricia said, her face hardening. "He thinks he's coming to authorize my eviction and your funeral. We need to call Holloway." Detective Holloway was not happy. We met him at a diner 3 towns over, afraid that Mark might have remote access to the home security cameras or microphones. We had already taped over the laptop webcams just in case. "Did you do what?" Holloway asked, ignoring his coffee. "You solicited a suspect to return to the country under false pretenses. Do you know how dangerous that is? If he finds out, he runs again, and this time he disappears for good." "He won't find out," I said, sliding the printout of the flight confirmation across the table. Mark had forwarded it to Patricia to prove he was coming. "He lands at JFK tomorrow at 4 p.m. He'll be at the house by 6. Holloway looked at the paper. He rubbed his temples. "These ladies are cowboy stuff. This isn't procedure." "Procedure wasn't working," Patricia said sharply. "You said yourself it would take months. He spent $50,000 of my money already, Detective. In months, there will be nothing left." Holloway sighed. He looked at me, then at Patricia. He saw 2 women who had been pushed past the point of politeness. "Okay," he grunted. "Here's how we play it. We can't arrest him at the airport. It's too crowded, too many exits, and technically, until we have a warrant signed by a judge for the wire fraud, which I'm still waiting on, we risk a habeas corpus issue if we grab him off the jet bridge." "So where do we take him?" I asked. "The house. The house is the controlled environment. We set up a perimeter, unmarked cars. We wire the living room for sound. We need him to admit to the fraud on tape, in person, to solidify the case before the arrest. We need him to say he took the money." "He won't just walk in and confess," I said. "He will if he thinks he's winning," Holloway said. "He thinks you're in the hospital, right? So when he walks in that door, he's going to expect Patricia. He's going to start asking about the insurance, about the accounts." "So I have to be there," Patricia said, her hands trembling slightly. "Alone?" "Not alone," Holloway said. "I'll have 2 officers in the kitchen pantry. I'll be in the surveillance van outside. But yes, you have to greet him. You have to keep him talking." "And what about me?" I asked. "I'm supposed to be in a coma." Holloway looked at me. "You need to be nowhere near that house, Alina. If he sees you walking around, the gig is up. You stay at a hotel." I shook my head. "No." "Elena!" "No," I repeated. "It's my house. It's my life he tried to cash in on. I'm not hiding in a Holiday Inn while you take him down." "It's too risky," Holloway argued. "I won't be walking around," I said, a cold plan forming in my mind. "He expects me to be dying. Let's give him what he wants. But he thinks I'm at the hospital." "We tell him the hospital discharged me for palliative care, hospice at home. It happens all the time. He'll love that. It means he gets access to the house immediately." Holloway stared at me. "You want to play dead in the living room?" "I want to see the look on his face when I open my eyes." The next 24 hours were a blur of nervous energy and stage management. Holloway brought in a tech team. They installed tiny microphones in the flower vases, behind the curtains, and under the coffee table. They set up a camera in the smoke detector. Patricia and I spent the time scrubbing the house. We had to make it look like a medical crisis had occurred. We moved a hospital bed, rented by the police department's props division, into the living room. We set up an IV drip filled with saline. I put on no makeup. In fact, I used a little gray eyeshadow to contour my cheeks, making me look gaunt. I pulled my hair back. I practiced shallow breathing. At 5:30 p.m., the unmarked van parked down the street. At 5:45, Officer Tom and another officer locked themselves in the kitchen pantry with their service weapons drawn. At 5:50, I climbed into the hospital bed in the middle of my living room. I pulled the sheet up to my chest. I hooked the fake nasal cannula into my nose. "Are you ready?" Patricia asked. She was standing by the window, peeking through the curtains. She looked terrified, but she was standing tall. "I'm ready," I whispered. "Remember, let him talk. Don't trigger him until he admits it." "He's here," Patricia hissed. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Calm down," I told myself. "Slow your heart rate. You are dying. You are weak." I heard the car door slam. I heard footsteps on the gravel. I heard the key turn in the lock. The door opened. The summer air rushed in, followed by the smell of expensive cologne, Santel 33, the scent of my husband. "Mom?" Mark's voice called. He sounded anxious, but underneath there was that vibration of energy, the excitement of the deal. "I'm here, Mark," Patricia said. Her voice wavered perfectly. "Where is she?" Mark asked. "I thought she was at St. Jude's. Why is there a car in the driveway?" "The insurance, your insurance," she stammered, "wouldn't cover the ICU stay because the premium lapsed. They sent her home for hospice. They said there's nothing more they can do." "Lapsed?" Mark sounded annoyed. "I paid that premium." A lie, for the record. He walked into the living room. I could feel his presence. I could hear the click of his dress shoes on the hardwood. He stopped at the foot of the bed. I kept my breathing shallow. In, out, in, out. "Jesus," Mark muttered. "She looks terrible." "She's unconscious, Mark," Patricia said. "Mark, the doctor said it was the stress, the eviction, the fighting." "Yeah, well, she was always fragile," Mark said dismissively. There was no sadness in his voice, just appraisal. "So, is there a nurse?" "She's on break," Patricia said. "It's just us." "Good," Mark said. "Where is her purse? I need her wallet. I need to find her Social Security card and the deed. If she passes tonight, we need to be ready to file the claim tomorrow morning before the autopsy request kicks in." "You want to file tomorrow?" Patricia asked. "Mark, she's not even dead yet." "She's as good as dead, Mark," Mark snapped. "Look at her. This is a mercy. Honestly, it fixes everything. With the insurance payout, I can pay you back the $200,000, we keep the house, and I can go back to Singapore debt-free. It's a clean slate." "Pay you back," he admitted it. The microphone in the vase heard it. The camera in the smoke detector saw it. "You took the money, Mark," Patricia. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight is a sound you never forget. It's mechanical, cold, and final. Mark didn't go quietly. He didn't hang his head in shame like they do in the movies. Narcissists don't feel shame. They feel persecuted. As Officer Tom wrenched his arms behind his back, Mark turned purple. "You trapped me," he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "This is entrapment. You can't use this. I was under duress. My mother lied to me." He looked at Patricia, who was standing by the fireplace, her arms wrapped around herself. "You witch," he spat at her. "I was doing this for us. I was going to double that money. You just ruined everything because you're too stupid to understand finance." Patricia didn't flinch. She just looked at him with a sadness so deep it looked like it was carving lines into her face in real time. "I understand enough, Mark," she said softly. "I understand that you were going to pinch that tube." The silence that followed that statement was heavy. Mark opened his mouth to argue, but closed it. He knew he had been caught. The malice in his eyes as he looked at me, his wife of 4 years, the woman he had sworn to protect, was pure, unadulterated hatred. "Get him out of here," Holloway grunted. They dragged him out. I watched through the window as the blue lights flashed against the neighborhood trees. Mrs. Higgins from next door was on her porch in her nightgown watching. The illusion of the perfect engineer husband in the happy life was gone. The whole street knew. And strangely, I didn't care. The truth was out. The rot had been cut away. When the police cars finally left, taking the chaos with them, the house fell into a profound silence. The hospital equipment, the bed, the IV stand, stood in the living room like the set of a play that had just finished its final performance. I sat down on the edge of the rented hospital bed. My legs gave out. The adrenaline was crashing, and the exhaustion was hitting me like a physical blow. Patricia walked into the kitchen. I heard the kettle whistle. She came back a few minutes later with 2 mugs of tea. She handed me one. She sat in the armchair opposite me. We sat in silence for a long time, sipping tea in a room designed for a fake death. "He's gone," Patricia whispered. "He's gone," I agreed. He really wanted you dead, Elena." Her voice broke. "I saw his face when he reached for that tube. He wasn't hesitant. He was eager." "I know." Patricia set her mug down and put her face in her hands. She began to sob. Not the manipulative, loud crying she had done for weeks to get her way. This was the guttural, ugly weeping of a mother mourning a child who is still alive. She was mourning the boy she thought she raised. She was mourning the lie she had lived. I could have sat there. I could have let her cry alone. She had been terrible to me. She had tried to evict me. But we were the survivors of the same disaster. I reached out and took her hand. It was frail and cold. She gripped my fingers like a lifeline. "I'm sorry, Elena," she choked out. "I'm so sorry. I was so jealous of you. I wanted to be the most important woman in his life, and he used that against me." "He used us both," I said. "He played on your insecurity and my passivity. But he lost." "What do I do now?" she asked, looking up with tear-streaked eyes. "He stole my money. I have nowhere to go. I can't stay here, Elena. I know I can't, after everything I did." I looked around the room. My grandmother's house. It had survived storms, and now it had survived Mark. "You can't stay here forever," I said honestly. "I need my home back. I need to heal alone." Patricia nodded, accepting her fate. "But," I continued, "you're not sleeping in your car. You stay in the guest room until we get the money back. We're going to sue him, Patricia. We're going to get every cent." Part 9, The Resolution. The legal battle took 14 months. Mark was denied bail. The flight risk was obvious, given he had a ticket to Singapore in his pocket when arrested. He sat in county jail while the forensic accountants tore through his life. We found everything. The bridge loan from Patricia, spent on luxury hotels and high-stakes poker online. The investments, Ponzi schemes he was trying to run on other people. The foreclosure on the rental property, finalized. But the bulk of Patricia's money, the $200,000 from her condo, was sitting in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It turns out Mark wasn't a mastermind. He was just greedy. He made a mistake in the transfer paperwork, leaving a digital trail a mile wide. Patricia and I became an unlikely team in the courtroom. We sat side by side on the prosecution bench. People whispered, the mother and the wife united against the son husband. When Mark was sentenced to 8 years for wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted gross bodily harm for the oxygen tube incident, he didn't look at us. He looked at the floor. I divorced him in absentia while he was in a holding cell. I took back my maiden name. I removed him from every policy, every account, every memory. The day the check cleared, the recovery of Patricia's funds, minus the lawyer's fees, so she got back about $160,000, was a Tuesday. I came home from work to find boxes in the hallway. Patricia was packing. "You got the check?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I did," she said. She looked different now, lighter. She had stopped dyeing her hair that harsh black color and let it go a soft, natural gray. She looked her age, but in a dignified way. "I found a small apartment, a senior living community about 20 minutes away. It's nice, small, but mine." "That sounds perfect," I said. She taped up the last box. She stood up and looked at me. "Elena, I don't expect you to forgive me for the beginning, for the way I treated you when I arrived. I forgave you a long time ago," I said, and I meant it. "You were scared, and you were being gaslit. We both were." She walked over and hugged me. It wasn't a polite hug. It was a fierce embrace. "You're the daughter I never had," she whispered, "and I'm sorry my son couldn't see what he had." "I see what I have. I have my life back." Closing and audience connection. I still live in the house with the Victorian wallpaper. I kept the rose bushes. I threw out the coffee maker Mark liked and bought a French press. Patricia comes over for dinner once a month. We don't talk about Mark. We talk about her garden club, my design clients, the weather. We are two women who walked through fire and came out the other side with scars, but with our dignity intact. Sometimes when the wind blows through the eaves, I think about that hospital bed in the living room. I think about how close I came to letting him win, not by dying, but by being passive, by letting him run the narrative. I learned that silence isn't peace. Sometimes silence is just you letting someone else load the gun. I'm safe now. My locks are changed, my deed is secure, and I know exactly who I am. What about you? Have you ever let someone cross a boundary because you wanted to keep the peace, only to realize they were waging a war? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice, please like and subscribe to Voices of Auntie May. We'll see you in the next one.